Waiting for them to be ready out there. Coming down the mountain when they come. Huh? Oh, hello. Welcome back. Hi. Oh, hold on a minute. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Sorry. Ooh. Lonnie was just, shh. I do know that. I do. You have not stumped me yet, sir. You have tried with Star Trek. You have tried with college football, and now you're bringing Judaism at me? No, sirree. No. He has not stumped me yet. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Happy Chanukah. And welcome to a few visitors and a returnee. Welcome, Justin. It's nice to have you. Our readers tonight are Beth and Natan, Beth DeZoden and Natan Fuchs. Beth DeZoden Fuchs and Natan Fuchs. Bobby Slade. Bobby's here, right? There you are. Oh, there you are. This is my eyes, not you. Karen Strick-Hartz, Rabbi Miriam Jarris, and Esther Ingber. So we'll start with the first slide, if you will, Arthur. Huh? No, Lonnie's not reading. So Lonnie doesn't have a reading tonight. I am not in charge of this. We come together tonight to reaffirm our connection to the Jewish people. At this moment in time, we are a community of believers dedicated to bringing light where there is darkness. The light of day decreases minute by minute and day by day as winter closes in. Gathering tonight, we ward off the darkness of this night and the chill of the season to feel the warmth of this gathering. Let us begin tonight by bringing light into our lives as we kindle our menorah and Shabbat candles. And I'm going to invite my colleague, Rabbi Jarris, to join me.
The world is a place of wonder. Whenever we pause to consider our surroundings, we find that it has changed, if only a little.
During this time of year, changes come to our days and to our nights. The chill of fall is slowly giving way to the cold of winter. Long sunny days have been replaced by long winter nights. Now darkness comes all too quickly before light's joy and day's pleasures are complete.
The cold skies of winter can make us feel sad or even lonely. Yet if we think about it, we see that there can be happiness too. This is why we are delighted that Chanukah comes just at this time of year.
Chanukah reminds us that we can bring the light and warmth of happiness out of darkness and cold.
Chanukah, Chanukah, Chag yafe kol kach,
Or Chaviv Mesaviv Gilayel Rak. Chanukah, Chanukah, Sevivon Sof Sof, Sof Sof Sof, Sof Sof Sof, Na'im Batov. Chanukah, Chanukah, Chag yafe kol kach, Or Chaviv Mesaviv Gilayel Rak. Chanukah, Chanukah, Sevivon Sof Sof, Sof Sof Sof, Sof Sof Sof,
Mana'im Batov.
light is the sign and condition of life.
Light is the goal of our days.
At birth, we emerge from darkness to a light so dazzling that at first we cannot see.
But as the eye adjusts, we learn that merely to see is not always to understand.
Illumination is not enough. To understand, we need enlightenment.
We need enlightenment and inner light whose fuel derives from wells of wisdom.
Should time or truth exhaust one source of knowledge, we must find another. Ours is an endless challenge.
To search out wisdom from its hidden depths, that it may brighten and enlighten our lives. Ori, ori, bi, Evo tikvati, tikvati, bi, Evo kochi, kochi, bi, vegam ba, vegam ba, Evo kochi, kochi, bi, vegam ba, vegam ba. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
To do our daily part to increase light in our world, we must remember that one candle alone is a small thing. One person alone is a small thing. One nation alone is a small thing. Remembering this, we must recognize something much more than our indispensability to others. We must also remember their indispensability to us. We cannot hope, not as individuals or nations, to reach our highest capabilities until we help those around us reach theirs. To be strong, we must serve. The holiday lights we kindle in our homes and in our hearts form a bridge of light from our ideals to the radiant spirit of free people. In this spirit, it celebrated the festival of Chanukah, the festival of lights, wherein the candle that gives its light to others is called the servant candle. We too are strongest when we serve.
Here it comes. Ba Moshe legaresh, ba nolvatesh, olachanu or katam, vecholanu or iktan, surah hoshek halashkon, surah mipnei haor, surah hoshek halashkon, surah mipnei haor. Banu choshech legaresh, beyadenu or va'esh, kol echad hu or katan, v'kulanu or eitan, surah choshech halashkon, surah mipnei haor, surah choshech halashkon, surah mipnei haor.
You are red.
I'm the red part.
You're the red part.
So there's more than one question at Chanukah. One is, how many different ways can you spell Chanukah? And a colleague of mine, Cantor Jonathan Friedman, 2 N's at the end of Friedman, has written a book called 100,000 Different Ways to Spell Chanukah. A candle is a small thing, but one candle can light another. See how its own light increases as a candle gives its flame to the other. We too are lights. Light is the power to dispel darkness. We have the power to move back the darkness in ourselves and in others, to do so with the light created when one mind illuminates another, when one heart kindles another, when one person strengthens another, and its flame enlarges within us as we pass it on. Throughout history, children of darkness have tried to smother this passage of light from one person to another. Throughout history, tyrants large and small have tried to darken, diminish, and separate people by force or by fear. But always in the end, they fail. For always, somewhere in the world, the light remains, ready to burn its brightest where it is dark. And every free people has remained free by resisting those who would extinguish in people the light of freedom, of love, and of truth.
Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam ve'imru shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, and those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community, to Lee Bricker, Saul Foreman, Martin Kurland, and Jim Walker, together with anybody whom you're thinking about tonight. If you'd like to mention names, Barbara? Thank you. Anybody on this? Esther? Thank you. Karen? Thank you. Did we miss anyone? Anybody else? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Makom ha'koach betocheinu, Mekorot ha'bracha michavrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Shalom. Ekom ha'koach betocheinu, Mekor ha'bracha renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
This has been a difficult Chanukah. I have a list of 7, 8 major and many, many more minor anti-Semitic attacks, some of them on property, some of them on individuals. You may have seen the attacks on Chabad, young people on a subway, another man in front of a restaurant. You might have heard of the arson at the San Francisco Hillel, or the 2 separate Michigan State University Hillel acts of arson that were committed. You may have heard about the crowds at the Chanukah concert in Amsterdam, attempting to put it down, and this is just in the last few days. But nothing was worse than what happened at the beginning of this holiday in Bondi Beach in Australia. I want to take a moment to remember these people. 15 in all. Members of our Jewish world and innocent bystanders. They were all innocent bystanders, but people who didn't even know they were near a Chanukah party and would be slaughtered for that coincidence. Tonight we remember Rabbi Eli Schlanger, the British-born assistant rabbi of the Chabad of Bondi, who organized the celebration, father of 5. We remember Alex Kleitman, 87, a Holocaust survivor, an engineer who protected his wife during the shooting, beloved for his storytelling and renowned for his resilience. We remember Dan El Kayam, a young man, a French national soccer player, killed while trying to escape the attack. We remember Boris Teitelroyd, 68, visitor at the Chanukah event, a cherished husband and father, a warm and generous man. We remember Adam Smith, 50, a local resident, a father of 4, caught up in the massacre while walking with his wife, a man who was known to be both generous and kind. We remember Tanya Tretiak, 68, who attended the event with her family. We remember Yaakov Levitan, 39 years old, a South African-born rabbi, the secretary of the Sydney Beit Din. We remember Reuven Morrison, 62. Born in the Soviet Union, a businessman, recalled for his bravery and generosity, and on that day he attempted to stop one of the shooters, which got him killed. We remember Peter Meager, 61, a retired Australian police detective, a voluntary rugby club manager. He was there to photograph the event, a beloved community member. We remember Marika Pogani, 82, Slovak-born, Australian volunteer who delivered thousands of meals to seniors, a winner of Community Service Awards. We remember Edith Brutman, 68, Vice President of B'nai B'rith New South Wales Anti-Prejudice and Anti-Discrimination Committee, an activist who advocated against racism. We remember Boris and Sophia Gorman, 69 and 61, a married couple from North Bondi who attempted to disarm the attacker, who died together during their act of courage. And it is appropriate to mention at this time Ahmed El Ahmed, who stepped in to complete the work that unfortunately the Gormans, now dead, could not. We wish him a speedy recovery. We remember Tibor Weitzen, 78 years old, also born in the Soviet Union. He died shielding his wife and friend from the gunfire. And finally, we remember the youngest, Matilda B. Poltovchenko, 10 years old, on Bondi Beach to celebrate Chanukah with the community. Matilda was a joyful, outgoing girl. She loved animals and dancing and being outdoors. Her family had migrated from Ukraine to Australia seeking a better life, and she died at the scene, trying to take shelter. Her sister witnessed her death. Her middle name, Bee, became a symbol of light at her funeral, where mourners used bee-themed tributes to honor her memory. Her first name, Matilda, was chosen by her parents in gratitude for their new life in Australia. At the Bondi Beach Community Memorial, mourners took to silence as they remembered all of the victims, and then they heard the strains of Australia's unofficial national anthem played in honor of little Matilda. We will now take a moment to do the same. Yehi zichram livracha. Esther.
Shalom. There are stars whose radiance reaches the earth only when they themselves are extinguished and are no more. There are people, the splendor of whose remembrance lights the world while they are no longer among us. These lights, those that brightly shine in the darkness of the night, they illuminate for us the way.
Our thoughts turn to all of those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death, recalling now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our congregation observes the art sites of these beloved members and their loved ones, of Lennon Gray Citron, Milda Dreyfus, Louis de Zoden, Ralph Goldsmith, Edward Good, Janet Gusson, Jean Hirsch, Harold Levine, Philip Lowe, Naomi Mandelbaum, Sylvia Michnick, Hai Muroff, Gertrude Oberstein, Irving Radner, Stephen Rice, Richard Dennis Cherhart, Manya Rost, Nedwin Smokler, Edward Warren, Tilly Wine, and William Wine. And if there's someone whom you're holding dear now in memory, whose name you'd like to share, we'll do so as we did earlier for those who are ill. Anybody on this side? Anybody here? Yes. Thank you. Yehi zikram livracha, may we find a moment of some comfort in memories of those whom we so dearly miss. I'm sorry, who else? I missed it. Thank you. Yes, indeed, a loss. Anybody else that I missed? If you can do so comfortably, please rise as together we will recite our humanistic version, our adaptation of Kaddish. Nitgadal v'nitgadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our name. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life, approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each, in our own way, take up our share in seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. All right, we're going to try to get a little bit back into the holiday spirit, and I am going to address a little bit more because some of it fits in with my talk that I had already prepared. But what I want to do tonight, and for some of you it's a review, and for some of you it might be new information, I want to talk about what actually happened that brought on this holiday of Chanukah, more or less. Because I got news for you, that miracle candle thingy didn't happen. I was at Fox Run today, and Nira, who's a woman who comes and visits, she's not a member of our congregation, but a secular Israeli, and she was reminding me of a song that said there was neither a cruise of oil or a miracle that happened. We took it into our own hands. And indeed, yes, but the story is a little bit more complicated than that. It's not just, even without the miracle story, a tale of, oh, they're oppressing us. Oh, let's go to war against them and reassert our identity. But that doesn't mean there's no meaning in the holiday. I'm going to share with you that as well. Our story begins in 333 BCE. Now, Tom, who challenges me with some question every week, some Jewish, many not, do you remember what happened in 333 BCE? I will not personally, I will not put the onus on you to answer it. That was when Alexander the Great came down from Macedonia, north of Greece, and conquered almost all of the Near East, right? And this guy was young. He was in his early 20s, and he was dead in 10 years. And he managed to take his armies all the way to Persia, all the way to India. When he died, all of this land, and it is nothing insignificant, it's everything that you see here. All of this, all of this, all of this, that was already there, it's up there. All of this, all of this. When he died, 3 generals took it over. Now this is 323 BCE, remember we're counting up. The things you see here in white, like Arabia, that's just sand. So that's why there's no people there to conquer. The generals were known as my Greek is terrible, the Diadochi, I think. But what it means is the successor generals. And there were 3 of them. One was named Antigonus. We're going to leave him out of the story. Another one was named Ptolemy, or just Ptolemy. And that's the general who became a king, and the yellow mustardy area down there, and the orange area for that matter too, although that was not really under them. And then there was Seleucus, who established the Seleucid Empire, and that's the big one that's going all the way up there and all the way going there and everywhere else. These were Hellenistic states because this was the military operation that brought to the world the synthesis of Greek culture with all the other cultures that already existed. I think you can go to the blank slide now. There's not a whole lot to point out on the map anymore. Maybe go back for just a minute. I'm sorry. There may be one little thing I want to show you. So if you don't know about Hellenism, it is this. It is the culture of Greece in every way that we learned about it in school, but late Greece, to be honest, when they already were taking their stories as allegories, and they were very much into philosophy and beauty, including the beauty of the human body, and architecture, and all the things that ultimately, many, many hundreds of years later, over 1,000 years later, would be rediscovered and would inspire the Enlightenment, which also had many other things by then to draw upon. This was wonderful kinds of things. This was a wonderful body of the types of things that we appreciate today. People who adopted or found in this form of Greek culture something of worth were called Hellenes or Hellenists. It was a way of educating. It was a whole culture that was cosmopolitan, modern, maybe not in our sense, but certainly the most modern in a way that we had had in this region. The Greek-style city, the polis, where we get the words like metropolitan from, was the vehicle that people used to assimilate into this culture. This was the city as imagined by Greeks. Not every city in this area was, but they were the ones that attracted people. Again, cosmopolitan. They served as cultural melting pots. The Near Easterners gravitated towards these values, particularly those who had leisure, those who had money, the aristocratic classes. They discovered Greek philosophy. Alexander the Great himself was a student, the set of Socrates. They discovered the arts, the sciences as they were developing, and all kinds of new values and ways of thinking about it. They redefined their own cultures, not in rejecting them, but in synthesizing, in what we call syncretism, bringing more than one culture together. Greek words, Greek ideas were becoming prevalent. Greek ideas were influencing all of what I've said before, but also commerce, a unity of spirits and peoples that we had never seen in many of these areas before. And Jews were drawn to it. Now, at this time, there was a diaspora. Most of the Jews in the diaspora lived in a little section there at the bottom of the Seleucid. Actually, it's right under the word Seleucid, Babylonia. But Jews had gone to other places too. There were some in North Africa. There were some going up the coast, the Syrian coastline. Some were in Greece. Most were, however, still in Judea or Judah, interchangeable. Jews found that there were things to be attracted to. There were also things that contradicted what their beliefs were, and it depended on what kind of Jew you were. Just like today, there were different kinds of Jews with different kinds of priorities and different emphases. Some of them were soft Hellenizers. They might be, I suppose, analogous to maybe modern Orthodox Jews. They're part of the culture, that's the secular world around them, and they accept science and so forth, but they're also committed to their Judaism. Their Judaism, by the way, was not a rabbinical Judaism because there are no rabbis yet. We don't know everything about how they practiced Judaism, but it was still very much internationally temple-based, even if they were far away from it. The priesthood that ran the temple in Jerusalem were still the main ritualizers, but we were seeing the beginning of many interpretations of the Torah that we later had adopted or adapted with the rabbis. Difficult completely to know. There are scholars who try to study the evolution. It's fair to assume that it was different in different locations, and part of it would have been similar or familiar, at least to us, and part of it would have been very, very different. Alongside these, and now we're going to focus just on the land of Israel, were more radical Hellenizers. And these were people who simply said, well, Judaism is nothing but an allegory too. And we can mix our allegories together. These are just stories. Now, for us to say this in the 21st century, some 2,300 years later, when we've had a lot of experiences, is one thing. For them to say it was to erase the possibility of a Jewish people, or at least that was the way that the soft Hellenizer or the anti-Hellenizers felt. And there were anti-Hellenizers as well. For while Jews were frequently attracted to live in the polis, even wanted, some of them, to create Jerusalem or recreate Jerusalem as a polis, something that figures into this war we had. Others lived in rural realities. They didn't have a lot of money. They weren't really interested in sports. That wasn't a Greek thing. They weren't interested in architecture. They didn't have a lot of time for philosophy. They were farmers. They were workers. They were craftsmen. They didn't go to the theater, something new that the Greeks had introduced. They didn't go to the gymnasium. They didn't go to the military very often. And Jews were increasingly doing that to learn to become more cultured and also to learn the art of war as it was understood. And they weren't into, as I said, and it wasn't a joke, sports. And you might recall that the sports in those days were the Olympics, right? All of those kinds of things, which were frequently performed in, shall we say, the altogether. Which for Jewish men meant that some of them, the more radicals, even attempted to reverse their circumcisions. Now, you can't really reverse a circumcision, but you can with, I've been told, certain weights and pulleys and time sort of cover it up. And they did that. These radical Hellenists had completely abandoned particularism in favor of a greater universal ideal. Now, we are universalists, but we're also particularistic. We're sitting in a synagogue, after all. And Jews have been debating this a long time, but this is the first time they debated it. And it was these ideas that began to percolate and create the war of the Maccabees. It starts with, and I'm not going to go into depth, because every time I go into depth, this is where everybody gets lost. So I'm going to just be very simplistic about it. The Ptolemies down there in mostly Egypt, but as you can see, occupying at this point in time also Judah. Sinai's not part of it. And the Seleucids were warring constantly over all kinds of things, and with the peoples they were occupying, because many of those rural people were not that happy with this, but many were. Many enjoyed it. But they really wanted the land bridge from Africa to the Near East and vice versa. Now, this is everywhere in biblical history. This is post-biblical we're talking about now, at least post the Hebrew Bible. But this was very, very common, because look where Israel, Judah, is located. And so, of course, it's going to change hands. And as it changes hands, one group of Jews are going to come into favor, another group of Jews is going to fall out of favor. There were two very, very far-flung aristocratic families in particular that this affected. And a good aristocratic family is always going to have priests that they've married into if they're not a priestly family to begin with. And those priests were sponsored by these various, in this case, two priestly families to hold the keys to the temple, the high priesthood, where all the good treasure was. That's where the dough was located. That's where people brought sacrifices, but they also brought gift offerings. And there was a long time to build up that store. And I think it changed hands 5 times. As the area changed hands, one family or another found themselves in power. And as it turned out, one family was a softer Hellenizer. In other words, we're going to do our Jewish thing. We're going to do it as we understand the Torah. But yes, we're going to participate in this larger world. There is what to learn from it. Not everything need be forbidden. A little bit of that modern orthodoxy, if you want to create a very, very distant and not at all terribly accurate parallel, but at least a way for us to think about it. And another was among the radical Hellenizers. Now, as I said, the peasantry was not aware of any of this happening. As long as the temple was working and operating, that's fine, because that's what they needed. They needed the rulers of the Jewish community, of the land, at least the local rulers, to be conscious of their Jewish needs. And mostly that worked. Until the Seleucids took over for what was the final change of hands between them and the Ptolemies. And as they took over, the Seleucids located their capital in Syria, they encouraged the radical Hellenizers. Why? Is it because they cared about how the Jews Hellenized or not? No, because the radical Hellenizers did something that we could probably all understand. They bribed them. And by giving them lots of treasure and promising to be a good vassal, the radical Hellenizers were placed in power. So that was several pages of stuff that I spared you. When that happened, though, these radical Hellenizers began to make changes that began to echo throughout the countryside. And a lot of these rural Jews became increasingly upset with what they were doing. They were actively bargaining with the Seleucids to turn Jerusalem into a polis, where these naked Olympic Games, for instance, would be held, where all of these radical kinds of changes would become centerpieces. And you could almost get your mind around that until you heard their beliefs theologically. Just as the Greeks had long ago put away their gods as real gods in favor of the notion of oneness, symbolized by those Greek stories that we all learned. Athena no longer believed to truly be an existing goddess, but an aspect of love from the unity of the universe or the unity of the world. This unity of the world, God, it's a oneness of God, not in the ways we understand it, in a polytheistic format, but it suggested, for instance, that Zeus was a symbol of unity for them, of all kinds of unity, universal belonging of humankind. And the radical Hellenizer says, that's what Yahweh is. That's what our God is. And you'll see in a moment how that began to cause problems. As they began to abuse their powers in this way more and more, and to alienate not just the soft Hellenizers, but the people in the countryside who had never heard about any of this before. If they did, they didn't care. Now we began to see unrest. Now the groups of people in the countryside were led by a group called the Hasidim, not those Hasidim, and not another group of Hasidim that came along. We've had lots of people called Hasidim. The Hasidim we have today are very different and yet a little bit alike with these people in the sense that they're pious, which is really what Hasidim are, pietists. And as they became angrier and angrier with every successive reform that these people made, they began to rebel. They rebelled in small ways. They refused to pay their taxes. They formed little what we would call guerrilla militias. They disrupted commerce. They disrupted trade and city life. They went in, they went out. You can imagine, because we have this. This upset the radical Hellenizers to no end, but it upset one person even more, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, as he was known, as an aspect of God on earth, a revelation to the people, if you will. Antiochus had had enough of this. Now you can go to the black slide. We don't need that anymore. Antiochus began to have enough of it, especially when his coffers were not filled anymore. And the attacks on the temples meant that he wasn't being paid anymore. And so he brought his army down. I'll answer questions later.
Here, AD BC?
We're in the BCEs. We're in the BCEs. We're in the 160s, 170s BCE. He brought down his army, and he attempted to impose peace on the areas of Jerusalem especially by building a fortress there called the Acra. The Acra was a very important fortress, and yes, it did chase the rebels out. And so now, once again, the Jerusalem temple was safe for these reforms. And it was at this minute that they made the worst decision they possibly could. Because in universalizing Yahweh and Zeus and all of this idea, they began to introduce practices into the temple that even you and I might have been shocked by, including the sacrifice of unclean animals. Name an unclean animal. That's what they were sacrificing. They brought in a statue of Zeus. They did this, it is told, and by a reliable source, in conjunction with a holiday that was widespread among many people, but brought there from Greece, called Rural Dionysus. We think this is the holiday, which took place on the 25th day of the lunar month, which we call Kislev. And I'll tell you about what happened to that in a little while too. Well, you can imagine what happened in the countryside. We are now up to 167 BCE. According to tradition, and we're not sure whether this is true or not, Antiochus, to punish the rural people, decreed that there should be no more observance of Shabbat, no more keeping of the Torah, ongoing desecration of the temple, no circumcision. We're not certain he did this, but many people felt that this is where it was going. A family of priests, minor priests, they had no job in the temple, living in a little town called Modi'in, outside of Jerusalem. I've been there many times. They became the leaders of a revolt. They are known to history as the Hashmonai family, but they are known better for their nickname, the Maccabim, the Maccabees. Possibly it was an acronym, possibly it referred to a hammer. The father, the leader, was named Mattathias, Mattatyahu. He died in a battle early on in the war that he had now declared on the Seleucids and on the radical Hellenizers, a civil war. He died in 165, 66 BCE, and his most charismatic child, his son, Judah, named for the country, he rose for the tribe of Judah, for the tribe, a very important tribe of Judah. He rose as the hero of the peace to us now historically, but as the leader of the military. And he took with him a large army, because by now the people were not going to put up with this anymore. They went in, they defeated the local military forces, and they even drove out mostly the Seleucids. The war increased, and they finally were able to take Jerusalem and their temple back. Now, there were reasons they could do this. You saw that far-flung kingdom. It's difficult to keep a place like that at peace. And at some point, Antiochus simply decided, I cannot let this go on. I've got other fish to, what is the word, fish to fry? Fish to fry. So he went out and fried some fish, but he did leave behind this fortress, but he was now highly aware that this war was going nowhere for him, at least nowhere good. It would not be the last gasp of this war, though. The radical Hellenizers were killed in large numbers by their fellow Jews. Jerusalem was taken, with the exception of the Akra, and the temple was purified and rededicated. Here is where we are supposed to insert the story of the miracle oil. But no contemporaneous source, and no source for almost 600 years that we possess, has any knowledge of this. This, which is so crucial to our calling it Chag Urim, the Festival of Lights, missing utterly and completely from the story. By 163 BCE, with their power in Jerusalem and in Judah beginning to wane, with Antiochus now dead, from a military campaign, probably likely in Persia. The Seleucid desire to continue this war began to wane, though they did for some time. Their new king was Antiochus V, who happened to be a child. A general took over. The military, you know, they are a little bit more practical. There were battles. There was several over the next number of years. Judah died in an early one. Then another one, his brother Jonathan died at. By 152 BCE, Jonathan, who had been appointed high priest by a Seleucid king, he too died. And then in 142, finally, they were able to chase the military out of that fortress, and they had their sovereignty. Judah was finally independent. And then something strange happened. The brother who took over, I think we're down 3 brothers now, and I didn't give you the Jonathan thing correctly, but I'll go back to it another time. I put it in too small a font. Which is beginning to affect me a lot, I must say. The brother that was left standing, I suppose, for this role, Simon, he declared himself high priest, chief military commander, and political ruler, and ultimately, because he founded a dynasty, he became the king. Which, by the way, is in violation of the Torah. A king is not supposed to be the high priest. But then again, the kings they were talking about were the descendants of David, and Simon also was not a descendant of David. They did not restore the Davidic dynasty. So that was the war. It was a bloody, horrible civil war. There were no miracles of light. There were no candles. For the next 100 or so years, not even, they began to fight amongst themselves. They became more Hellenistic. They were kind of becoming soft Hellenizers already. One of the things that I don't usually mention, you know, they declared a holiday. They proclaimed the 25th of Kislev would be the holiday. But they didn't give us good reasons. We have some reasons. One reason that one of the books of Maccabees gives us is that, well, during the war, they missed Sukkot. And because they missed Sukkot, they had to go back and celebrate it. Now, this might have some plausibility. Sukkot back then had a whole big fire thing that went with it, a whole big lights thing. It was kind of a festival of lights in addition to being every other kind of festival. You know, it's a huge, big deal. We don't celebrate it right at all here. And that's because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were imported and kind of took it over and overshadowed it. But you know what the rabbis call Sukkot? The holiday. It was the holiday for them. So that's plausible. That's plausible. More likely, it seems to have been, because of the date, related to the placement of Zeus. And the book of Maccabees also talks about this, the one to which I'm referring. The placement of Zeus happened on that day as part of the solstice festival. So it's very, very possible that it was that. In fact, if you look at another holiday that became a solstice festival, one that everybody else is celebrating right now in this country, you can begin to understand it. Because I can assure you of a couple of things. Jesus was not born in Bethlehem. That's one, and that's a different lecture, and I've given it before. And Jesus was not born in the wintertime. That for sure. He was not born in the wintertime. Jesus became born in the wintertime because the early church father said, we have a Saturnalia problem. Now, Saturnalia was the Roman version of this solstice festival. We have a Saturnalia problem. Let's make that the celebration of the Christ's birth. From my understanding, the Maccabees said, we have a Dionysus problem. We have a solstice holiday problem. And it was the very day on which we were desecrated in this temple with that statue we destroyed. Let's make this day about the rededication of the temple and let's do it on that day. And you can bet the bank that they absolutely were aware that they were introducing a solstice festival. But no candles, no oil, nothing like that. Where did that come from? We don't know. I heard a theory this week that possibly a long time later, Herod, who comes along, and that's AD, early ADs, right? And a little late BCs, although we don't say AD, we usually say BCE and CE. Excuse me. So this is not the BCE portion, but that Herod possibly, because he was going to rebuild the temple, this magnificent temple, the one that is identified in most art as the Second Temple, where the Wailing Wall at the bottom was a retaining wall because he built a giant platform. It was later conquered by the Arabs, who built a mosque on top of where the temple was. But it was to legitimate, supposedly, that he found pure oil belonging to the first temple, and that gave him the right to build the second. So that might have been the beginning of some oil stuff. We don't know. The great historian of the Jewish people from the 70s CE, Josephus, he talks about a holiday that Sherwin was convinced was the holiday. Sherwin called it Nerot. I don't know where the hell he got that from. That means candles. Well, except Josephus wrote in Greek, so he didn't say Nerot. He said lights. So Sherwin decided it was Nerot, and so the Sherwin-Winian theory is that but he might have had something go, but that's all we know, because you know what Josephus does say about how it became a festival of lights? Josephus is definite. He says, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good thing, by the way, for all of us to learn to say once in a while. He said, I don't know. So but we do know there was a festival of lights. We do know that. And by the way, we know that the rabbis knew it. Here's a little Torah, a little Talmud that I didn't discover until 5 years ago when I was sitting around during COVID with a lot of time on my hands. And I found this, and apparently the rabbis, I'm not talking about the rabbis, I'm talking about like my rabbis, just decided not to teach this to us. It's a story of the first man, Adam, establishing an 8-day solstice festival because he got scared and the light was diminishing. And so he brought light. It's a little bit more complicated, but that's what it says. And he gave it to all the peoples of the world. This is the rabbis now. This is the rabbis like 1,400, 1,500 years ago, 1,600 years ago. This is not a million years ago. And the rabbis are therein recognizing a festival of light that everybody was doing. They go on to say the Jews stopped because the pagans started doing it and they ruined it. That's basically what they said. They used it for evil, or they used it for paganry. The rabbis, however, are the ones who came up with, or at least recorded, our story. So perhaps they had the memory of it being a festival of lights. I mean, certainly Josephus knew it was, even though we didn't talk about magic oil. But this idea of a festival of lights holds on. Possibly from the moment the Maccabees said, we'll do this now on the 25th of our month, our lunar month of Kislev. We'll do this now. And then we'll have erased the crime of the radical Hellenizers in erecting Zeus. And we'll have a new holiday that'll be ours to celebrate our victory and our rededication, our Chanukah of the Bayit, of the house of God. So that's there. So why did the rabbis come up with their story? Well, it was probably in circulation already, but it was clearly just a folk tale. They're sitting around talking about Shabbat, believe it or not, in this period of the Talmud. Hold on. And they say in Aramaic, Mai Chanukah. Mai Chanukah. And what is Chanukah? And they begin to tell the story that you all know. Natan, you want to add something? Okay, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. The rabbis had some motivations for all of this. One of the things that they did is they kind of turned it into a very minor holiday. Why? They'd had enough warfare. They didn't really want to remember the Hasmoneans, the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees that much. They wanted it to be more about the temple and not about the war. It's one of the reasons the first book of Maccabees, which really by all lights should have been placed in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, was not placed there. They even chose a passage from the prophets, not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of the Lord alone will we be redeemed. It wasn't just this war. This was the war that we all liked because we won, right? There had been 2 more wars. There was one in 70 that destroyed the temple with the Romans. And then there was a worse war in 135 CE when the Bar Kokhba revolt came. They were tired of war. And so they were encouraging light and lightness. But all of this light against darkness coming in is very, very human. Those of us who, and now it's me too, live in this kind of climate. I didn't used to live in this kind of climate. We know that the days get painfully short, and for some reason also up here bizarrely long later on, but painfully short, and the wind and the cold and everything else, and it does make you feel a certain kind of depression and despair, as one of our readings held this evening. But light is also, as some of our readings suggested, a symbol for the goodness of people. And darkness, the dark of night, is a symbol for what people do in the dark of night, which is often not fun. Sometimes it is, but often not good. And so for me, this is the most important symbolism of Chanukah. And I do believe that the Maccabees have a place in this because they came from an idea of trying to survive as Jews in the face of perhaps universalists who had gone too far. That doesn't make them my heroes. Nor can I give the sermon that other rabbis give about the need to unify the way we did under the Maccabees. And then they enter into the stories of light and miracles and so forth. I can't give you that one either, because it simply didn't happen. And I didn't join this movement to tell fairy tales. But I also didn't join this movement to evict from our tradition important symbols. And despite of what we've just learned, clearly our people did turn this into a Jewish solstice festival of light, however it happened, by creating this holiday of dedication of Chanukah. Our ancestors created it for us so that we too could look at these symbols of light and darkness. And over time, they became the dominant symbol of the holiday for all of us. Certainly, Israelis were inspired to independence through the Maccabees, no question. They're a very big symbol for them. Certainly, American Jews have always liked to talk about religious freedom. There's an element of that even in the true story, although that really wasn't what it was about, and the parallel to 1776 is kind of weak. But nevertheless, they saw meaning in our Festival of Light. Now, if it sounds like I'm reading a little bit now, I am, because I want to share, for those of you who didn't read my commentary, just a few of the last pieces of it. The people who saw this meaning in the Festival of Lights were not naive, nor were they overly optimistic. They didn't believe that a victory would simply come from unity, even if they told a story of unity that was not true. And what, as I said, we've just taken to heart is a ritual reminder that darkness is real. But it's also a reminder, as Adam discovered in that story, that the light returns. And light for us is a symbol, too, of hope. And Jewish endurance demands hope. Hope in Jewish history is not naive optimism. Hope is a discipline. Sherwin called it a choice. For us, hope is an insistence upon continuing even when our circumstances would argue otherwise. It is one of the, I believe, essential ingredients of our resilience. And that lesson matters right now, perhaps more than ever in our adult lifetimes. Many Jews today are experiencing 2 fears at once, and I'm among them. I'm frightened by the resurgence of anti-Semitism. We're convinced that Jewish disunity, our fragmentation and inability to tolerate disagreement is weakening our response. And this is why I think the true Chanukah story must be told alongside the symbols of light and darkness. Because the Chanukah story reminds us that this tension is not new. Chanukah should not and cannot teach us that Jews will survive only by agreeing with each other. There's a fantasy that Orthodox Jews sometimes talk about, that when all the Jews of the world will successfully and purely observe 2 Shabbats in a row, Mashiach, the Messiah, will finally come to redeem us. That unity is a figment not only of imagination, but it's a figment of reality. It doesn't exist. That's probably not a thing to say, but it's a fantasy. And like most fantasies, it cannot guide our lives. And Marie likes to say, hope is not a plan, but hope is a tool. Our Jewish history suggests that disunity can also give us strength. Jews have survived conquest, exile, persecution, and genocide, including during periods of profound internal division. What sustained us was not unanimity, it was the refusal to disappear, the willingness to hold on to hope even when the future looked impossibly dark. And right now, I think it's looking pretty dark. Chanukah offers no promise of an easy future. It offers something hard, but also more honest, the knowledge that we have endured before, frequently under much worse conditions, and that continuing choosing light over surrender is our act of courage. Something else that Judaism as a tradition teaches, and I spoke about this on the high holidays, I spoke about resilience too, and that is chaim, life. Too many of those who hate us believe that life begins at death. Even for those Jews who believe there may be something after death, that is not their belief. Life is to be celebrated, to be embraced. What do we say when we're happy? What did Tevye sing? L'chaim, to life. This is what we want. This is what we do with our holidays. And I was tempted on Chanukah to go into mourning because I was that sad. But I remembered the tradition of celebration. Judaism, Jewish tradition has always said, celebrate life. Celebrate it. Celebrate whenever you can. What did Tevye sing? God would have us to be joyful even when our hearts lie panting on the floor. Our hearts are panting on the floor. But we still have something to rejoice about. And that's what we do tonight. That's what we do in moments of darkness and light. Let us celebrate. L'chaim. Shabbat Shalom and Chanukah Sameach. Joseph, please join us on the bimah again. We will sing our version of Maoz Tzur, a little bit of a universalistic interpretation, if you will.
Children of the human race, whether free or fettered, wake the echoes of your song, where they may be scattered. Yours the
you, Joseph, for the beautiful music. Arthur does the slides, David the streaming. I wish you all a very joyous Chanukah. Also, a happy secular New Year. We will not meet until 2026 arrives. January 9th is our next service. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Chag Sameach.